Hello friends, so today we are going to discuss everything you need to know about the aperture. So to demonstrate the same, I have this manual lens with me, which I'll be showing you how the aperture works, how the light, what amount of light enters, how everything happens. I'll show you using this lens. So before we go ahead with that, let's first understand what exactly aperture is. So as you can see through, I don't know if it's visible, I think it should be. You see the opening, as I move the aperture ring, the opening is changing. So what aperture is basically, so you can see there are multiple blades inside inside this lens. So this is the aperture. Aperture basically consists of multiple blades that are there. Some lenses have 9 blades, some have 7. Like this one has, I think, 6 blades. So the shape of the bouquet, it also depends on the number of blades which are there, but let's not go over there. So yeah, basically the aperture, as you can see, it controls the amount of light that enters the camera through the lens. So how does the opening or closing of the aperture affects the light entering? So now let's see, assume that this is the opening of the aperture while you're clicking the photo. Any guesses what aperture value this is? So this is basically something around f22. How the aperture value and the opening relates is basically the higher the aperture number, the smaller would be the aperture opening. So it's inverse. And similarly, the smaller the aperture number, the wider the aperture opening. So as you see, this is f22. And as you go f16, f11, f8, 5.6, 4, 2.8, and this is f2. So this is f2 right now. So the higher the aperture number, smaller the aperture opening. Smaller the aperture number, higher the aperture opening. The value of aperture is denoted by f followed by the aperture number. For example, if you're using 2.8, the f2.8 would be the aperture value. So now let's see how the opening or closing of the aperture affects the amount of light entering your camera. So now let's assume it is, let's say, f2.8. So I've moved from f2.8 to f4. So now the amount of light entering the camera to the lens would get half. So the amount of light entering the camera would now be reduced to half as compared to that which was coming in at f2.8. So as you move a stop higher, the amount of light coming through the lens gets half. And it's simple. If you see at 2.8, the opening is much wider as compared to f4. So it's obvious the amount of light that is entering through the lens would be half. Similarly, if from f2.8 you move to, let's say, f5.6, so then now the light entering would be 4 times less. As you move stops higher, the light gets reducing. Similarly, let's say you're using f22, and as you move from f22 to f16, which is 1 stop less, the amount of light entering would get double. So at f22, whatever light was coming at f16, that would be double of what you were getting at f22. Similarly, at f11, it would be 4 times as the light coming at f22. And as in this photo, you can see how the stops move in aperture. So it basically, what you can do is just remember 2 numbers, that is f1 and f1.4. So now, as you can see in this photo as well, from f1, 1 stop more would be f1.4. Then the next stop would be f2, 2.8, f4, and similarly. How you can remember these numbers? Simple. Remember f1 and f1.4 and double the number. For example, if you double 1, it would be f2, which is a stop more than f1.4. Similarly, if you double 1.4, it comes f2.8, which is the next stop of f2. So this is how you have to do, and you will get to know which the next stop number is. And I'll give a link of this image in the description below. You can download this image and keep it in your phone or desktop for your reference. So now comes one of the main reasons why you must be watching this video, is how aperture affects depth of field. Depth of field, or if you do not understand what depth of field is, you can easily remember the quality of blur that is happening in the image. Okay, so I'll be referring to 2 terms, which is shallow depth of field. Shallow depth of field is where the blur effect is more, and deep depth of field is where everything is in focus from the foreground to the background. So shallow would be more blur effect. Deep depth of field means less blur effect or minimum blur effect. So how you can understand this, it's really simple. All you have to remember is the higher the aperture number, the smaller the aperture opening. That you already must have got to know a couple of minutes back while I was discussing. So the higher the aperture number, smaller the aperture opening, and smaller the aperture opening, deeper would be the depth of field. It means when the aperture opening is the smallest, let's say f22, the depth of field that you get would be deep, which means the blur effect would not be there. For example, if you are clicking landscapes or a photo where you do not want the background to be blurred out, you use a higher aperture number, f11, f16, f22. So that is when you use a higher aperture number to get a deep depth of field. But on the other side, when you want more of blur effect, you want shallow depth of field, that is when you use a smaller aperture number like f1.8, f2.8, f1.4, 1.2, such numbers. So when you use a smaller aperture number, the wider aperture opening, the depth of field that you get would be shallower. So there's another interesting fact related to aperture, which is that the aperture value that you select also affects the shutter speed that you will be selecting to get the correct exposure. So how it works is basically, for example, let's say you're shooting at f2.8 at the shutter speed of 1/100. So if you move from f2.8 to f4, it means that the opening of the aperture is getting smaller. So now the light that would be entering would be half of what you were getting at f2.8. So at f4, if you're getting the amount of light half of that as f2.8, so light is half. So in that scenario, you'll have to slow down the shutter speed. Why? Because the light is entering through the lens, which is now half. So you'll have to compensate to that by using a shutter speed which is one stop slower than what you're using. So if you're using 1/100 at f2.8, so at f4 you will have to use 1/50 to get the similar exposure. So that is the simple math, simple calculation. If you increase the aperture number, you will have to decrease the shutter speed. So if you go from f8 to f11, a stop more, the light entering would be half. Similarly, you will have to reduce the shutter speed by one stop. So if you increase the aperture number, decrease the shutter speed. And if you decrease the aperture, you'll have to increase the shutter speed by the same number of stops. Now talking about the situations when you would be using a smaller f number, which is wide aperture opening, this would be in two main scenarios. One would be when you want shallow depth of field, which is more blur effect. So if you want to click portraits with the background to be blurred out, you would be using a smaller aperture number such as f2.8, 1.8, 1.4, similar aperture numbers. And the second scenario would be when you're shooting in low light conditions and you're not getting the for example, you want to use minimum of 1/60 shutter speed because you do not want the camera shake to be there. So in that scenario, you can use an aperture number which is minimum so that it allows the maximum light to enter through the lens. So these are the two situations when you would be using shallow depth of field by using a smaller aperture number. So using the higher aperture number, that would usually happen when you are clicking landscapes or cityscapes, and these are the situations when you want everything in your frame to be clear and nothing is out of focus from your subject to the foreground to the background. So in that situation, you'll be using the higher aperture number. And the second situation could be when you're clicking low light photography, low light photos. In that situation, you can use f11 or f16 to get long exposures so that you can set a slower shutter speed. These are some of the situations when you can use a higher aperture number. So that is it from today's video. If you have any questions, feel free to comment in the video and I'll be happy to answer all the questions. And do like this video and subscribe to this channel.